I'm Beverly, and I'm on the witness stand.
Welcome back to the witness stand, where courtrooms are my catwalk and subpoenas are just spicy invitations to drama. This week, the jurors are rattled, the lawyers are sparring, and the receipts, Lord have mercy, they are stacked higher than pancakes on Sunday morning. Let's get to it. All right, Monday, big one. Jane is still on the witness stand, and she's been there about 4 days, which is longer than Cassie. She talked about what is pretty much, I would say, chilling, but it's definitely disgusting hotel nights, which is the same thing as what Cassie called a freak off. He being Diddy, little bitty Diddy, which that everybody was kind of discussing that this week. He coerced her into having group sex with paid male escorts, which is kind of what it goes along with some of the prosecution's charges. So he would film them. Well, first of all, he'd watch and they'd film. And then afterward, he'd play the film back and they would have sex while he watched the film. This is one disgusting trial and one disgusting human being. And yes, I'm showing my bias. I hope he goes to prison for life. He is disgusting. And if you disagree with me, then I give you all props and rights to disagree with me, but I'll have to tell you, you're wrong. Okay, so she said that he coerced her into having these hotel nights by using rent, holding that over her head. He would give her gifts, lavish gifts. He did give her, not travel, but like vacations, that kind of thing. But he didn't give it to her as much as she wanted. She talked about how he would take other girls to expensive vacations, but he wouldn't take her to much, making her think that she wasn't worthy enough and that she had to do more, or maybe she had to ask more. But anyway, he gave her stuff, he bought her off. That was pretty much the gist of all that stuff. And then there was physical violence. She talks about one night in June of 24 where he got mad at her about not wanting to have sex with a particular escort, and he would beat her up. He beat her up that night in June in a hotel room. And then she talked about one time at her house where he got mad and he went after her. She ran through the house. She kept going further and further into the house until she got into a bathroom or a closet or somewhere. Anyway, these doors in this house were they were described as very heavy doors. He kicked through 4 of them to get hold of her, and then he beat the crap out of her. Then he told her to get makeup on and get ready because she was going to have another hotel night. They played phone and audio evidence. They played phone messages, and this was interesting. Right after the Cassie Ventura lawsuit, he called her or texted her. I think it was a text, but I don't know. But he told her, quote, "I need your friendship." So my thing is that was probably some evidence of some witness tampering, which is another thing that he is accused of. So when the defense got hold of I was going to say got hold of her, but when the defense got up and started doing their cross-examination, they talked about how Jane, in some of her texts and things, called these events as a love fest, and that she got, like I said, she got lots of lavish gifts and her rent was paid. But then they also hammered home the financial dependence and said that at one point, Diddy. At one point, Diddy sent her or wired her $150,000. And even though she was still professing love and affection, she would say to him that her idea of a good partner was somebody who was a protector and a provider. And that was used to support the argument of the defense, which, it was a good defense or an argument. Let's just say that. They talked about the fact that these hotel nights were really routine and not coercion. And she said that the Garagos emphasized the fact that they were of a lifestyle and not a criminal enterprise. Now, some courtroom drama. The defense filed a mistrial motion, and I'm looking at my notes to make sure I got this right, citing prosecutorial misconduct, arguing that Brianna Bongelin, you remember her testimony last or the week before about hanging over a balcony, and said that it was contradicted by location evidence because they had receipts that Sean was in New Jersey. I think it was New Jersey, but I'm not 100% sure. But that he was there and couldn't possibly have been dangling her over a 17th floor balcony when she said it happened. But Cassie, in her testimony, confirmed this. Now, again, I said before and I'll say again, I might have the wrong date, but I dang sure know if I was hanging over a balcony 17 floors. Who won Monday? Well, it was a very heavy day for the prosecution. Jane delivered really harrowing and detailed information about what was going on and patterns that were laid out as far as that Diddy would hold things over her head and that she really loved him and she was just in this mindset. It was terrible. The defense came back and said, hey, you got something for this. But because of the testimony, I think the prosecution won this week. I mean, because of the arguments that the prosecution laid out, I think that it outweighed any kind of testimony or cross for the defense. So I would say that it belonged to the prosecution that day. So we go back on Tuesday with Jane again. Like I said, she testified for multiple days, and she talked about these drug-fueled hotel nights in which there were like hours of foreplay. And then, oh my God, I can't even believe I'm getting ready to tell you about this. I know you've heard it because it made such a big impact in the news, but here we go. She talked about dressing up, playing parts, role playing. And in one part, she called it the trifecta. And that was when Combs would take on the role of Michael Jordan. Look, I'm from North Carolina. Michael Jordan's from North Carolina. Whatever you think about him, I haven't liked some of the stuff he's done, but we have to all admit he was great. And this right here offends me greatly. Combs played Michael Jordan. Jane was Kobe Bryant. I don't understand that. How in the world? How is she Kobe Bryant? I mean, she's, for all intents and purposes, we're hearing she's a very small girl and she's Kobe? Good Lord. Why is she playing Kobe? Except for later on, we might talk about that. And then Paul, who was one of the favorite male escorts, he would portray Shaquille O'Neal. I know that Shaq and Jordan are probably spinning at this moment. They've got to be throwing up in the toilet, really and truly. She called them, as I said, the trifecta, and she said that they were part of the hotel nights and she was required to participate in them. Now, this is interesting. They played a audio, so I guess it's a voicemail, and just don't understand how they got those voicemails unless they were recorded somehow. And who recorded them? I don't know. Maybe I missed that in trial. But anyway, they play these videos and not videos, but they played these audios and maybe she kept them. Maybe when he left messages, she kept them, which was a good thing in this trial. But he called her his crack pipe and then nicknamed her CP. That voice note must be part of iPhone, which I don't have an iPhone. I've never heard of a voice note until I found out. That voice note was sent in March of 23 after the couple took to Turks and Caicos. I've always wanted to go there. I hear it's really nice. But she called it a term of endearment, crack pipe. Okay. So anyway, the defense lawyers in the case presented, I forgot I wrote this. The defense lawyers presented that voice note and Jane's response as evidence along with a text message. A text message that Jane sent to Combs thanking him for funding her house lease and highlighting affectionate aspects of their relationship. And they used that to challenge her being a victim. Again, I don't agree with them saying that she's not a victim. However, I do believe it was a good argument. I can see where they use that. Okay, the defense cross-examination, which we talked about that a little bit, consent versus coercion, and Garagos was doing the questioning on this, which, a woman questioning a woman, I think was powerful in its own right. It was a good decision, I think, on the part of the defense. She talked about how Diddy gave Jane lots of really expensive gifts. Again, a Van Cleef bracelet or necklace. It was a piece of jewelry, upscale dinners for her birthday. But from the reports I heard earlier, that birthday didn't end up so well for Jane. And they talked again about it has nothing to do with trafficking. It had everything to do with their lifestyle. And then they talked about her researching cuckolding. That sounds like such a dirty word. And I'll admit that when I've read books about, way back in the day, I've heard this word and I always thought it meant just being a fool. And maybe that's still part of the interpretation, but it means a man whose wife has sex with other people. So I guess you could say he's a cuckold. I'd call him something else, but I guess you could say that. Anyway, then the defense talked about love confusion, where Jane would profess her love for Combs, which emphasized the fact that it was more about consensual sex and not coercion. And it paints a relationship of real emotional complexity, I think. So let's get to some good stuff. Jury turmoil and court moves. All right, there was a juror, was not named, but juror number 6, who in voir dire answered questions that said that he lived in New York, which is a requirement to be on the jury here. And in an offhand comment in the jury room, which they call it the robing room, he made to one of the other jurors that he said he had recently moved to New Jersey and was living with his girlfriend and his daughter. Now, what was interesting was when he was first asked this in voir dire, he said that he was living with his girlfriend and his daughter in the Bronx. So that's why he became eligible for jury. Then he made this comment, and the people who were over the jury, they have staff that oversee the jury, I don't know, just make sure they're taken care of, but watch everything, I guess, too, to make sure there's no breaking of the rules. They heard this and they reported it. So that started some going back and forth with the prosecution and the defense. Well, the judge decided, well, let's just bring them in. You know what? The judge decided to go back into the robing room and talk about this outside of the jury presence and outside of the courtroom presence. Well, this went on for like 2 hours and everybody was abuzz. What was going on? And then they brought the guy in and they asked him, and he gave a story about, yes, his girlfriend and daughter did live in New Jersey, and that he spent 5 days of the week in New York and working, and then he went back to New Jersey on the weekends. He was questioned again, and this time he made some comments that was completely different. So he was questioned again, and in that third questioning, he answered in a completely different way. So the judge decides that, being a juror means having some really good ethics and not being swayed and being able to follow directions. That was his big thing, was following directions. And he said they asked him so many times and he gave 3 different answers. And the judge was concerned about the fact that he had given so many different answers. And the prosecution was going like, no, we need to get rid of him. We need to get rid of him. The defense was coming back and saying that he was a black man and that if they removed him, the alternates were 5 white, I think, and 1 black man. And they said that they don't just take the jury and take number 13 and move them over. That's not the way they do it. It's kind of the luck of the draw. And so they said the odds were stacked against them that they would have that black man, and then the jury wouldn't be as diverse. Now, I need to go back and look about the jury and see. I thought it was pretty diverse, but I don't know. I don't want to say that for 100%. But there are discussions about that particular juror appeared to be leaning in Diddy's favor. And I think there had been some looks or something that had made them think that. Well, the best thing that could happen for Diddy is to be found not guilty of everything. I don't think that's going to happen. The next best thing is a hung jury. So if this guy were to stay on and he really did lean Diddy's way, he's definitely got the hung jury. So there's a lot of question. Well, the judge, and I'm going to try to say his name again, Subramanian. Let's just call him the judge. I can't pronounce his last name. I even went and did pronunciations in Google, and I still can't. I can't get it in my head. Okay, so he said that he was going to remove him. Well, the defense came back and said, I know this is a Hail Mary, but we found a case that was very similar to this. So the judge said, okay, I'm going to take some time. I'm going to review the case that you gave me, and then I'll make a decision and let you know. Okay, judge came back, ruled he was gone. So Monday there will be another person in the jury, and I know that's going to be a big discussion with everybody, waiting to see if it's the black man or if it's one of the others, which I think are 5 white men. But either way, I think it's 5 white people. Okay, so we'll definitely see what happens. The judge ruled on a mistrial. I think we discussed that earlier, that Bonglin had gotten her dates mixed up according to the defense, and said that they wanted a mistrial based on that. And the judge ruled at this point, because remember, he was holding out until he made a decision. Well, he made that decision and said that the defense had the opportunity to cross-examine Bonglin, and the alleged issue did not warrant a mistrial. So that was denied. This is something that I loved. I have to love. This is some little courtroom drama that Geragos was questioning Jane. And in that questioning, she made the comments about the gifts, the lavish gifts, all of that stuff. Talked about Van Cleef jewelry, her rent, and that he apparently had upped it from $10,000 to $15,000 a month, and a Bottega bag, and trying to say that Jane was financially complicit and not a victim, not being coerced. And when Geragos asked her how much that Bottega bag was worth, Jane came back with, how much is my body worth? Bam! I loved it. That was a good one. Jane came back hard on that one, and that's the kind of stuff we live for. But it was a lot of testimony it was emotional. It was so much inner turmoil for Jane. Like she was conflicted in so many different ways. I really felt bad. She talked about Combs' self-described polyamory. Had to go look that up too. I guess I'm behind the times. Meant that having sex with more than one person. Well, and then Jane talked about how she set limits for the hotel nights, that she refused to perform with certain escorts. But remember, he went back and coerced her, but he coerced her through physical violence. So it goes back to he had control over her. There was no more witnesses on that day. Jane got off the stand. This is what I found very interesting, and I'm curious to see what you guys think about this. All of that testimony, that question and answer, and all of that hard question and answer by Geragos. Jane gets off the stand, goes straight over to Geragos, who was sitting at their table, and she gave her a hug. They said that Geragos just was really stiff and just didn't really respond. Now, Geragos sort of tore you up on the stand, plus the fact that she's Diddy's lawyer. And Jane was talking about these horrible things that Diddy did to her. And she hugs Garagos. What the hell? I mean, are we talking Stockholm Syndrome? What is going on here? Did that negate all of her testimony? I don't know, but I'll tell you right now, that was weird. That was very weird. And I don't know what to make of that. I do believe that the defense scored points that day. What we hear is that Cassie is going to be called back to the witness stand. And if she is, you can buckle up, because the Queen of Receipts may still have some pages to turn. So I think that they might bring her back to now support Jane. These two really go hand in hand, because remember, this is still the prosecution's case, and they can still introduce evidence that they have not already talked about. So when the defense gets the case, prosecution can't introduce unless there's some extenuating circumstances, which I don't know what that would be. But all eyes are on her, and they're going to go back and try to prove trafficking again. And I would think that it's going to be a doozy. It really is. What do we think? The defense painted her as conflicted, and the prosecution they conveyed the thought that she was broken. That I agree with. That I do agree with. But she might be called back for rebuttal, and I don't know. We're going to go back and forth with Cassie and Jane. I don't know. But Cassie, I think she was on the stand for 3.5 days, and Jane on there for 4. But it's hard testimony. And I'm telling you, by the end of the day, I just want to take a shower. It is just disgusting to me. We cannot let this pass without talking about the incident. The thing that got everybody talking this week, the appearance of Kanye. Yay or yay. It wasn't yay that he turned up. That's all I have to say. Now, why did he show up? Support of Diddy. He's been vocal about support of Diddy also, but the word on the street is that, and yes, I'm on that street, but the word on the street is that he has participated in a lot of this stuff. And I don't know, is he trying to keep his name out of it by supporting Diddy and say, hey, I supported you, keep me out? I don't know. But word is that he is one of the well-known rappers that they've been discussing. I think it was Jane discussed that was, yes, Jane did discuss it in like the beginning of her testimony. She said a well-known rapper was in the hotel room and said some stuff like what he wanted to do with her, and that she flashed him. She flashed her boobs at him, and that was a big thing. Why'd you do that? And she said she didn't know. She was basically caught up in the moment. Okay, so he shows up, and he thought he was going to go right into the big courtroom where everything was and let Diddy see him and all of that. Well, he didn't get in there. He had to go to the overflow room, and he did show up for all intents and purposes. He wanted to get into the big main courtroom, but he didn't get in there. He ended up going into the courtroom overflow, and he only stayed about 20 minutes, and he sat beside one of Diddy's sons. I can't remember what this boy's name was, but he sat beside him, and then he left after about 20 minutes. Didn't see Bianca. It just was Kanye. He was there. And so we have Jane. She's left. Kanye's left. And then we have Homeland Security Special Agent Gerard Gannon. In March 24, the raid on Diddy's Florida mansion, the Miami Star Island estate, he described the plans, the execution, the security protocols, all of that thing. The items seized, including firearms in proximity to paraphernalia. They discovered AR-15 rifle parts with defaced serial numbers. Discovered a lot more guns than that. They discovered a lot of long guns, but they were in what they call the security room, because Diddy had his own security team, and they said that those weapons were kept in that room. However, that room was not locked, and there were kids periodically and a lot of people in and out of that house. So that's not good. It's not good for Diddy at all. There, beside the bed, there was a table. If I've got this straight, like a bedside table, and there were manila envelopes or envelopes of some kind with K on the outside. And when they tested the residue inside, it was ketamine. So Jonathan Perez was an ex-personal assistant to Diddy. He went through a presentation of hotel logs, text messages, and organizational details, including the alleged freak-offs from 21 to 24. I think that was the time he worked for him. He talked about the fact that he had to obtain drugs for Diddy and that he would set up the rooms. These all were confirmed by multiple sources. He described setting up what they call king nights, hotel nights, freak-off nights, or just freak-offs for Combs, and he had to get things like outfits, drugs, honey, lubricants, cleaning rooms. He had to clean the rooms afterward. I can't think about it. I can't. I'm telling you, it made me sick. I didn't even want dinner that night thinking about it. But and late night arguments with Diddy and Jane, the violence, he talked about all of that stuff. And then here's the big one. He clarified, even though he did the cleaning and shopping and was his personal assistant, that was also part of his job, that he wasn't just the personal assistant to Combs. He was basically told what he had to do, and the things that he had to do were illegal, like getting the drugs. And that right there goes to the charges. Is that RICO? I don't know if it's RICO. I can't remember which charge, but that definitely supports the prosecution on that one. And that supports a big charge. And I don't know, I thought he was a really good witness too. I don't know. I think that everything that I've seen about the sex trafficking is a done deal. But I will say that we don't know what the defense is going to come up with. So we'll just have to see. And remember, I've said it before, this is just the prosecution case. So I can't wait for the defense. And I hope the prosecution is able to blow holes in that like Swiss cheese. So, okay, that was a big week. That was a very big week. And I'm hoping that we get through this week. I think the prosecution is saying that they should get through before the end of this week. So let's see, and then the fireworks start. Not like there hasn't been fireworks already, but definitely the fireworks will get going once the defense starts. So what do you think? I'm curious to see. So we'll see what the prosecution does this week. Hopefully they'll finalize their case and we'll move on to the defense, because God knows it's been a long trial and we're kind of ready to be done with this. So stay tuned. We'll keep you posted. And until then, you may step off the witness stand.
I'm Beverly, and I'm on the witness stand.